Hi, I'm Danielle Leitch. We're experiencing a time right now where marketing is being fundamentally reshaped. AI, changing search behavior, and new discovery channels are redefining how brands show up and how they compete. In this video series, Beyond the Click, presented by More Visibility, I am speaking with marketing leaders from all industries about how they are navigating this shift and what it really means for the future of marketing. Today I'm joined by Zach Van Kerrebroeck from StackAdapt. Hi, Zach.
Danielle, how's it going?
Great, thanks. I appreciate you joining us. Why don't you share a little bit about your background?
For sure. Yeah, I'm a director of sales at StackAdapt. So StackAdapt is a programmatic platform. We essentially allow marketers to buy every type of digital ad format under one roof. So it's the ability to reach your ideal consumer across any part of their day and then report it all within the same software. And I help lead a team that work specifically on strategy of like how to use this software and leverage it for your marketing strategies.
Awesome. And More Visibility is a proud partner of StackAdapt, so we appreciate that too. And you are, I would say, probably like the rest of us, waist deep in the digital landscape and all of the changes and working with a lot of CMOs and marketing teams on a regular basis right now. So I'm really interested to hear your perspective in a few different areas, not only from your own personal experiences, but also what you're hearing, from a lot of your clients who are representing a number of different brands, across the country and the world, I would say. So, just kicking things off from your perspective, what's the most important shift happening in marketing right now that many organizations are still underestimating?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the biggest changes, I think the current state is that a lot of organizations are working in silos, and marketing orgs are planning in silos, but consumers don't experience brands in silos. So, I think there's going to be a big continued effort for instead of allocation of budget and resources, like orchestration and personalization, rather than like planning different channels, like search, linear, CTV, social as separate entities and looking at it as like a channel-based approach for media teams. I think it's going to be a lot more people-based. And I think some evidence that we see of that is the use of first-party data in marketing is only accelerated. So I think organizations may still be underestimating the importance of first-party data in the way that it can help them be more effective at not only reaching their ideal consumer, but reducing waste and creating a more personalized experience.
Yeah, that's great. And I love what you said, orchestration rather than allocation. And that non-linear way of approaching your digital strategy may very well end up impacting organizational charts and the reset of roles, right? So to your point, if it can't be so finite of just search or just display or just email or just social, like that may really have implications beyond just the digital media strategy. It could be, where does that live within an organization? So I think those are, you made some great points. Mid-market marketing teams often need to adapt quickly, but unfortunately, many times it's with limited resources. Where do you think leaders should be focusing their energy right now to remain competitive?
Yeah, I mean, I work with a lot of mid-market marketers, and I think there's often a temptation to sort of always be punching above your weight in terms of the volume of what you can accomplish or do. But I think teams I see a lot of teams thrive in the way that they create leverage with what they have. So I think it's more actually about creating and maximizing like the time and bandwidth that you do have as an organization and avoiding waste. So AI is obviously a huge topic these days in any conversation. So automating repetitive work, I think, is really important, freeing people up to be creative and to think. But also back to the first party data conversation, like prioritizing the assets that you own in order to feed that into what you're already doing. Um, and then I think like the last thing is finding partners, not vendors, and consolidating where possible. I think being working in programmatic advertising, that is sort of the whole reason for the industry, rather than having separate vendors to get a specific ad format off the ground, or like a specific campaign off the ground. It's like, how do I turn that into software and have a marketing campaign across any screen or any environment, without having to have 1,000 different conversations with 1,000 different vendors.
Yeah, good points there. And you brought up AI, so of course you knew we were going to go there in this conversation, especially being called beyond the click. So as AI is starting to reshape how people discover and evaluate brands, products, services, how do you think the role of marketing visibility is evolving or going to evolve?
Well, I definitely think that search is going to be scrutinized a lot more. I think paid search is the least questioned line on any media plan right now because of how easily tied it is to conversion. And there's obvious value in search, but in that there's, I think, the potential for waste. But with I saw a stat that 13% of desktop queries right now are AI generated. So there's obviously a behavior change on the consumer side. And so I think it's not only going to be important where search sends consumers, but also where AI sends consumers, because a lot of people are clicking on citation links that uh, an AI generated answer is giving them to continue their research about a brand. So, like, I think where search engine optimization has always been important, there's going to be a new focus for, in terms of brand visibility, on AI engine optimization, which is more about how machines select a brand as opposed to a person selecting a brand from 10 links. I also think that, like, generative AI is going to present a lot of cool new potential ad formats. It's hard to predict that as things change so quickly, but that's something that excites me as someone who's always trying to offer my clients more ad formats under one roof.
Yeah, no, that's great. As a leader yourself within StackAdapt, you're managing a team. For all of us as leaders who are trying to navigate this period of rapid change, what mindset or leadership principle do you think matters most right now?
I think that uh, in all ways, trying to be like a force multiplier is going to be really important in the age of innovation that we're in at the moment. I think it's important to be curious, to be committed to doing more with less out of a principle, but always acting on new information. And operating with a sense of urgency around innovation. I think it's important to be testing new tools, but not be tied to the results of any of these tests, because ultimately the speed is always increasing, and we want to be able to always, again, the kind of going back to the earlier point of like create leverage. The way we do that is by having an understanding of what's out there and what works for us.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate, you saying be curious. I think in this time that we are in right now with the constant evolution of change, on the daily, being curious is really important, not only for leaders, I think for anyone, within the marketing organization. I think that curiosity is so important because otherwise it can create almost like a fear or a sense of being overwhelmed, right? If you can't approach it with curiosity.
100%. Yeah. I think the only way to understand a landscape that's changing so quickly is to actually want to look and understand what's in front of you, for sure.
Yeah. And, branding is to the point you made earlier, just about visibility and how it's being impacted by AI and, citation links. Um, Branding we've gone full circle. We really kind of for the past probably 10 years, there's been a lot of marketers that have pulled away from the branding and gone very bottom of the funnel, and very transactional. And I think now that kind of shift has to really lean back towards branding again, because of what's happening, in this zero click new landscape that we're seeing. So I think opportunities, with programmatic like StackAdapt offers, should really be very thoughtfully considered into a marketing team's media mix, where maybe in the past it wasn't something, that had been considered or thought necessary. But, just curious what you're hearing, from some of your marketing team clients across different, verticals and industries that you serve, is that something that you're seeing with budget shift?
Yeah, I I think it's never been easier to like get to a specific consumer because technology allows you to be so pinpointed in the way that you target. But what that means is that it's actually even more important for a consumer to know who you are, not just be in front of them at any one time. And I think you know, one of the things that, we see in digital quite often is the idea that, we should be showing someone a digital ad and they should jump off of the couch and run to the store immediately. But, nowadays digital could be a television ad, it could be a billboard ad, it could be on their phone, on their computer. And so I think there is a renewed if we're going to really, it's the idea that digital isn't a ad format, it's an infrastructure. And it's always important to make sure that consumers know who you are and that you build a relationship with them, which goes back to the point of like that personalization and orchestration. And I think people are understanding that more and more as digital becomes more than just, I think, like search and social.
Yeah, that's great. Final question for you. What's one assumption about marketing today that you think will look very different 5 years from now, which in marketing years is like forever, right? So I'm curious to hear your answer.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to make any predictions because I know how much things always change. But um, I think maybe just even dovetailing off of my last point, like I think the biggest bias today is that traditional media is upper funnel and digital media is lower funnel. When again, like it's those are just the infrastructure layer for an ad format. And I think right now that's affecting the way that people are allocating budgets. It's sort of distorting the way that like people will look at out of home and traditional TV as something that can't be measured and therefore can't be scrutinized, but at the same time hold maybe digital channels to a standard that, they're all on the same footing, and that like a search ad should have the same return on investment, or have the same CPA as a CTV ad. And so I think in 5 years from now, people will all be buying ads more like programmatically through software just by default and ease of use, and to try and find efficiencies. And therefore, they'll understand programmatic as a as an industry term is actually just a way of distribution and not a single channel that should have only one use.
Awesome. Great. Really appreciate your insights, Zach. Some great things that you shared with us today. This has been More Visibility Presents Beyond the Click. Stay tuned as we continue exploring the future of marketing with today's marketing leaders. Thanks for watching.